What's up guys, in this week's video I wanted to talk to you about what my life looks like after I was diagnosed with a disease called Dermatomyositis at the age of 3, which is a disease that attacks your own skin and muscle cells, which leads to basically chronic skin inflammation and loss of power, which meant at the moment that I was diagnosed that I wasn't able to walk, stand or even sit by myself. All I could do was lie down, and my skin was always very red and really sensitive due to the inflammation. My hope is that with this video I can provide some sort of spark of hope for people who are currently going through some sort of sickness, and in addition to that I really hope that people who are sick can show this video to their loved ones to kind of show them what kind of impact a disease can have on your life. First and foremost, in this video I want to paint a realistic picture of what my life looks like right now, 15 years after my diagnosis and 8 years after being declared healthy. What I want to talk about today is first a bit of my backstory from up and around when I was diagnosed until right now. I also want to get into some of the obstacles I still face till date, and I also want to talk about some of the good things that being sick gave me, because I think it's really important to look at the positives of everything. Then to kind of get deeper into that, I want to talk a bit about how I developed a positive mindset, because I certainly didn't have one 3 years ago. Then I have a message for people who aren't sick themselves, and that's more about how to deal with a sick person, because for example I noticed that whenever I'm in my wheelchair people don't talk directly to me but to the person who is pushing my wheelchair, and those are the type of things I would like to address. Then I of course also have a message for people who are currently sick, and then last but not least I have a short message for parents who have children who are sick, because I do think that me getting diagnosed at the age of 3 and now being 18, that I have something to share about that experience. The last thing I want to say before we get started is that at some points in this video might seem a bit negative, because the truth is that I still have to deal with obstacles that are a result of me getting sick. But I just want you to keep in mind that the end goal of this is sharing a positive message, but also an honest one. So yeah, just please give me some time to get positive after telling about the obstacles again. Okay, so to get started I wanted to get into a short backstory, which very basically is that when I was 3 years old, all of a sudden I couldn't move anymore, and after months of going in and out of hospitals I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called Dermatomyositis, which, as I said in the intro, makes your body attack its own muscle and skin cells, with all the consequences that go with that. As a result I was heavily medicated, and I can say that I missed about 70% of school days in elementary school. And I do have to say that in the earlier years that was about 90%, and in the later years that was about 40 to 50%. Eventually that evens out to about 70%. In high school I still miss about 30 to 50% of school days to date, which is obviously very unfortunate, but it's something I've gotten used to by now. And the positive thing that comes with that is that if you miss school that often, you get really good at planning everything in advance, and that's just a skill that's pretty valuable to have, and I'm glad to have it. And friends wise and all of that, I'm missing so much who hasn't really impacted me at all. I still have an amazing group of friends, and I still really like it when I'm at school too. Yeah, it's just a really nice atmosphere, so social wise it doesn't really affect me in that area. So that was the very short backstory. If you want to get a more detailed story, you can check out my Why Physical Activities Are a Challenge for Me video. Now I wanted to get into some of the obstacles that I still have to face. One of the most difficult obstacles that I still have is that my energy levels vary a lot day by day, and it's still not really possible to accurately predict what my energy levels are going to be for a certain day. It's not like I know how my energy levels are going to be tomorrow. It's just not really possible to predict that. Because of this I do have to be very thoughtful about what I do and do not do. For example, I know that if I meet with a group of friends after school or in a weekend, it's possible that that has quite big effects on me the next day energy-wise. So with that, I do have to be careful. For example, if I have an exam week coming up, then I typically don't really meet with friends that much 2 weeks in advance, because getting good grades is important to me, and therefore I choose to put that above meeting with friends. So that's just a matter of setting your priorities straight, which can be hard to do. But as I said, I've been dealing with this for 15 years now, so I kind of gotten used to it. Plus, I grew up with it. Most people who get this disease get it at the age of 16 to 18. Then you can really see a difference between life before and life after. But for me, there isn't really a life before, so that in a sense makes it easier for me to get used to all of these things I have to think about. Another important obstacle, and that's more of a mental one, is accepting that sometimes you can't do something even though you really want to. And I don't think that's a struggle that ever truly goes away, because, as I said, with all those changing energy levels, one day you can do it and the next day you can't. So that in a sense makes it harder to accept that on that day that you really can't do it. And sometimes that leads to me getting angry at myself for not being able to do it, and I think that's totally normal, and it's fine. You're allowed to get angry at yourself as long as you can then kind of reconcile with yourself and see the positive side of things. For example, let's say you decided you wanted to meet with friends 3 days in advance, but on the day itself you realize, okay, I really can't do this, I just don't have the energy whatsoever. That sucks, and you can definitely feel bad about it for a couple of hours if you want, but after that you can also kind of look at it like, hey, now I have a complete day for myself where I can binge watch a new series or something. So just looking at the positives of everything is really important, I think. But just know that it's, in my opinion, really normal to get angry at yourself just for not being able to do something, and just having to accept that. Now I wanted to get into some of the good things being sick gave me, because as I just said, looking at the positive sides of things is really important. The first positive thing that I think being sick gave me is that when you're at a hospital, like at least half of your life from a very young age, and you see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people passing by in a hospital, you get pretty good at reading people, which can come in pretty handy later in life. So that's one positive thing that being sick gave me. Another thing is that it taught me the value of just listening to what people are talking about, but also, for example, when a doctor is telling you what you have to do or what you can't do or whatever, it's really important that you listen, and therefore I think that I got more primed to listen to people. And that's again a thing that comes in really handy in your later life, because you'd be surprised what people are willing to tell about themselves and other people if you just listen. And yeah, it's just, in my opinion, pretty fun to see another side of people that most people don't get to see from that person, simply because they're not listening enough. Another really good thing that came from it is that if your body from a very young age doesn't cooperate with you what you want it to do, you kind of learn to challenge your mind instead. So from a really, really young age on, I really challenged my mind. For example, normally in the Netherlands you learn to read at the age of 5 or 6, I believe, but the first day my sister learned how to read, she immediately taught it to me, and therefore I was able to read when I just turned 4, which obviously opened a whole new universe of discovery for me, because from that moment on I read tons and tons and tons of books, and that's just really a nice distraction and occupation when your body isn't working like it's supposed to. And another thing that I've done from a very young age is doing puzzles like Sudokus and all of that. That just is a great way of challenging your mind. And I think that is one of the biggest contributions as to why I'm currently in the highest level of high school education that is possible in the Netherlands. So yeah, that's one positive thing that I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have done as much had I not gotten sick. And last but not least, being sick is part of who I am, and all of the experiences that came with it also shaped who I am as a person right now. And to be honest, I'm pretty happy with the person that I am. So that is, I think, another good thing that came from me being sick. Now I wanted to get into how I developed a positive mindset, because as I said at the beginning, that is not something that I've always had. To be honest, up until February 2017 I was quite negative. I always talked about the negative first and then the positive, gave negative way more power over me than positive. But in February of 2017 I came across a video in which Hal Elrod talked about his life and his experiences and how he had changed his life. And after seeing that video and later buying his book and reading that, I really started to change, because Hal Elrod is the author of a book called The Miracle Morning, which basically inspires you to get up earlier so that you have a little bit of you time in your day, and during that time you do 6 exercises that are supposed to just help you and make you a more positive person. And I did those exercises for about 1.5 years, and now I still get up earlier, but I've changed my morning routine. But just watching that video and then reading the book and all of that, that just really set the change to a positive mindset in motion, and I'm really glad that it did. After reading that first book I started reading more self-improvement books, and from one thing came another, and now it's 3 years later and I can honestly say that I've had basically a positive mindset about 95% of the time since that moment, which is something that I'm really happy about. And I think it's just really important for your life enjoyment in general to look at the positive side of things. And the funny thing is that I do not necessarily believe in a god or a higher power, but I stumbled across that video in a moment where I was finally sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I do think that that is the only way that you can create a lasting change, because if you're not fed up with yourself, you probably won't follow through on the exercises that you can do to become a different person. A kind of message in that is also that if you know someone who is a bit more negative or something and you would like them to change, please don't push them. You can kind of guide them in the right direction, but in the end it's them who need to just get sick of who they are and want to change, and there's nothing that you can really do about that. Then the next thing that I want to get into is a message for people who aren't sick, because I've seen, as I said in the intro, that, for example, when you're in a wheelchair, people don't talk directly to you, but to the person behind you. And those are the type of things that just are really annoying if you're the one in that wheelchair or if you're the one that looks different. And the very simple message that I want to communicate is just simply look people in their eyes, whether they're in a wheelchair, whether they're burned or whatever, just look them in the eye. I understand that people don't want to give the impression that they're staring, but believe me, sick people or people with disability have had enough encounters where people are staring to know that you're not, if you're just looking them in the eye. And at least for me, it made me feel way more human, because it's really, I don't find it awful because I can kind of laugh about it with my family afterwards, but it's just not the greatest thing if people start talking about you to someone else when you're literally in front of them, just a bit lower. So that is something that I really hope a lot of more people can do. Just look them in the eye, that's all. Another thing that I just thought about is that, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, is do not treat them differently. And I understand that that is hard because sometimes they ask to be treated differently, but that's different. The main thing that I mean with don't treat them differently is don't try to guess how they're feeling or what they are or aren't capable of doing. Just ask them. The most annoying thing that happens to this date is when my family or someone else are like, no, you did this, I'll do this because you can't do that. Or it's probably not good if you do that. I mean, just ask me. Do you think that you can do that? Yes or no? Most sick people have enough self-knowledge to know whether they can or cannot do something. The message that I have for people who are sick or have a disability or anything of the sorts is kind of what I've talked about throughout this video over and over again, is just try to see the positive side of things. I do not really believe that everything that happens to you happens for a reason, but I do believe that everything that happens to you can be looked at from a positive way. Even the most negative things can be seen in a positive perspective. For example, many people believe that if you'd give me the chance to undo my sickness, that I would, when honestly I wouldn't, because as I said, me being sick was such a big part of my life that it helped shape the person that I am today. And since I'm really happy with who I am today, I don't want to change that. So just trying to look at everything from a positive perspective. Even if you don't believe the positive side that you're telling yourself about, just making your mind aware that there is a positive side to be seen usually makes me feel better. And lastly, my advice to parents who have a sick child or multiple sick children. If you have multiple children and there's just one sick, please try to treat them as equal as you can, because I've seen it in the hospital a lot of times. There can be, develop some very bad blood between the siblings otherwise. Even, for example, if it's about house chores and the sick child can't do something, just work with them together and figure out what they can do. It's not necessarily that if one child has to unload the dishes at the age of 7 that the other one has to do it at the exact same way and the exact same chore. Just make sure that in the end it kind of adds up to each other. And what I just said about looking for a solution together, the together part is really important, because as I said in the message for not sick people, it's really annoying for someone who is sick or has a disability or something if other people start deciding what you're going to do. So yeah, just look for a solution together. And I'm aware that a lot of parents of sick children have a really heavy burden to bear, and it's really difficult to deal with all the hospital visits and all of that. But the main thing that I want to communicate is that it's okay if you don't know what to do. It's also fine to tell your child that you don't know what to do. Having to deal with a sick child is really hard, and try to find someone you can share the burden with, and do not always try to put up a responsible adult mask and try to pretend to your child that everything is fine, because they can feel that it's not. And in my opinion, it's then better to be able to talk about why it's not fine than try to pretend. And kind of related to that is the only regret that my mom has regarding handling my sickness is that the first 3 years about when I was diagnosed, my doctors were really adamant on like, she can do this, she can't do this, if she does too much of that, that's bad, blah blah blah. And they set really tight restrictions, which I get because they wanted to keep me alive, and obviously that's what my parents wanted as well. But because I was always told what to do and what not to do, it became very hard for me to, at a later age, learn how to set those boundaries for myself. And my mom to this day wishes that they would have let me handle that a bit more from the beginning on, because it took a lot of time and some guiding therapy sessions for me to finally start to be able to set my own boundaries and see what I was and wasn't capable of doing. I think that this is all I have to say about this topic right now, and I really hope that this video can be of some value to some of you. Even if this just helps one person, that would already mean the world to me. If it did help you, please comment it down below, because that's just awesome to read. And if you have any questions, comment them down below as well, and I'll try my best to answer them the best way I can. If you like this video, please like it, and if you want to see more of my videos, please consider subscribing, and I hope to see you next week.